Hi all, welcome back to software engineering course. Let's get started. In the last class, we had studied about coupling and cohesions, which were the modularity criteria. So the another modularity criteria is the open closed principle. So we'll look into this one now. So this is a design concept which came into existence more in the object oriented context. Like your coupling and cohesion, the basic goal here is again to promote building of the systems that are easily modifiable. As modification and change happen frequently, and the design, if it cannot handle this modification and change, what it will happen? It will result in a system that will die fast or will not be able to easily adapt to the changing world. The basic principle of this it states is software entities should be open for extension but closed for modification. Now, what does this mean? It should be, that entity should be open for extension and closed for modification. So, we say a module, it is open for extension. That means its behavior can be extended to accommodate new demands placed on this module due to the changes in the requirement or system functionality. We say the module is being closed for modification. That means the existing source code should not be touched or it should not be changed when making the enhancements. These enhancement may be due to your system functionality or it can be a change in the requirement. Then you might have a question, how does one can make an enhancement without changing the existing code, right? Now, this principle it restricts the changes to the modules to extension only. That is, it allows addition of the new code but disallows changing the existing one. That means you can add any number of code on top of the existing code, but you do not have right to change the existing one. Okay? Code changes whenever there is a code change. If you change the existing code or right, if you change the existing code, what will happen is you have a heavy risk, and to ensure that change has not broken any of this your old functionality, you have to do a regression testing, and this regression testing it requires a lot of time. So how can you minimize this risk? So one option is to do not make any changes to the existing code. So by this way you can minimize the risk. But if changes are not made, then how the enhancement will be made? The principle says that the enhancement should be made by adding a new code rather than altering the old code. Okay. Now, there is one side benefit of this. So, if I ask you, say, write a program for bubble sort or any example you take. So, I'll give you an option for this. Whenever I say write a program for bubble sort, I'll give you two options. Either you can write your fresh code, everything from scratch. Okay. The second option is I'll give you 20% of the code, you write other 80%. Or else I'll give you 60% of the code, you write other 40%. Which one do you choose? So if you choose the second one, like whenever if you want to change, I mean that means I'll give you the 60% of the code and you'll write the 40% of the code. What would happen there is you have to understand what 60% of the code I have written. You have to go through all the variables, the logic, everything, right? Then on top of that, you have to write another 40% of the code. So if you take another option, like you write the fresh code, that is probably it is the most chosen option, I believe. So if I given a chance, what would you do? You'd write your own program, right? Instead of going through the old code, understanding it, then making modification, it is always better to write a fresh code. And usually the programmers they choose this writing of the new code itself. Now, so but the reality what is happening today is like you have to build the system on the existing software. That means you have the existing code already present, you have to write the new code on top of it. You have to understand the old one and you have to write the new code on top of it. So if this principle is satisfied, then we can expand the existing system by mostly adding the new code to the old system and minimizing the need for changing the code. This open-close principle can be satisfied in the object-oriented designs by properly using inheritance and polymorphism concepts. Now, inheritance, what does it do? It allows creating a new class that will extend the behavior of the existing class without changing the original class. And it is this property that can be used to support open-close principle. For better understanding, we'll consider an example. Okay. This is the explanation of the example. I'll directly go here into the example. You can see in the slide there are two figures, figure 1 and figure 2. First I'll discuss about the figure 1, then later we'll see about the figure 2. Okay. Now we'll consider an application in which we have a client object. Now this client object, right? This client object, it interacts with the printer object. That means client has something to be printed so that it would contact the printer class and the printer will take necessary steps and print it. So this is shown in your first diagram. Now in this design, the client, it would directly talk or call the methods of the printer object for printing something. Now say suppose you want to enhance this system. Enhancement is that you have to allow another printer to be used by your client. So under this design, to implement this change, a new class printer2 will have to be created. And the code of the client class will have to be changed to allow using the object of printer type, printer2 as well. Now, if we consider this, like whatever I discussed now, so say suppose we already have a client and a printer, right? Say suppose your client want to talk to another printer or you want to add another printer, say P2. So what would happen? So you should again have a separate class printer2 and your client code has to be changed. Whatever the client class is there, right? It has the codes or the methods of this class has to be changed so that whenever the client wants to interact with P2, that particular method has to be invoked. So instead of doing this, whenever we use this thing, so what we are doing, we are changing the existing code which is in the client, right? So this does not satisfy our open-close principle, whatever we discussed just now. Now, what can be done then? So, there is another manner, so that another way wherein we can make use of this open-close principle. So, in this design, instead of directly implementing the printer1 class or printer2 class, what we do is like we create an abstract class called as printer that defines the interface of a printer and specifies all the methods a printer object should support. That means instead of adding a printer class directly, separate class directly, what we can do is like we can have a single printer class. Now this is an abstract class. It will have all the methods that the printer object should support. Okay. Now your printer1 is implemented as a specialization of this class. In this design, when printer2 is to be added, it is added as another subclass of the type printer. That means you have a base class or the abstract class and you have two subclasses, printer1 and printer2. Your client need not know about these things, these subclasses. There might be a printer3 as well, printer3 class as well here. Okay, your client need not bother about how many printers are there, whatever. So it has to interact with the base class printer. Now, the client only deals with a generic class, that is printer, and its interaction is the same whether the object is actually of type printer1 or printer2. Now that is shown in your figure 2. Whenever the client it wants to print something, it will directly call the methods of this printer class. It does not know about the subclasses that are there. Again, this printer, it can have n number of subclasses, and any one of those can start printing. So this is the inheritance property of object oriented that is leveraged to support our open close principle. The basic idea is to have a class encapsulate abstraction of some concept. If this extra abstraction is to be extended, the extension is done by creating a new subclass of the abstraction, thereby keeping all the existing code unchanged. Getting it? Okay. Okay, let's have a quiz now. Say whether the below statement is true or false. According to open closed principle, software entities should be closed for extension but open for modification. Tell me whether this statement is true or false. You have got a minute of time to respond. Next, we will study about function oriented design. Here, we'll study about structure charts and structure design methodology. First, we'll see what is function oriented design. So, it is an approach to software design where the design will be decomposed into set of interacting units or modules where each unit or module has a clearly defined function. Okay. Now, creating the software system design is the major concern of the designing phase, right? So many design techniques have been proposed over the years to provide some discipline in handling the complexity of the designing large systems. So we have already seen what is the definition of design methodologies. So the aim of the design methodology is not to reduce the process of design into a sequence of mechanical steps, but to provide guidelines to aid the designer during the design process. So the design methodology, it employs the structure chart notation for creating the design. So we'll check first what is a structure chart, okay, and how to represent it. So for a function oriented design, the design can be represented in terms of graphical notation, and that notation we call it as structure chart. So how do we draw this structure chart? What are the notations used? These things we'll see. So first, in a structure chart module, in a structure chart, a module is represented with a box with a module name written within the box. Okay. So say suppose, let me draw the structure chart in the next slide. Okay. Say suppose we have a module called A. Okay. So that is represented in a box. Okay. It is a box rectangle. It should be proper way. Okay. So say suppose A is the module name. Okay. Then the second, it says an arrow from module A to module B represents that module A invokes module B. If suppose we have two modules, say suppose this is a module B, and how does it is represented in a box. Okay, this is module A and this is module B, and we have a arrow mark from A to B. Okay, like this. So this means module A will invoke module B. Next, B is called the subordinate of A and A is called the superordinate. So here the class or the module which invokes the other module, we call it as a superordinate, and the invoked module we call it as subordinate. Now the arrow is labeled by parameters received by B as input and the parameters represented returned by B as output, with the direction of flow of the input and output parameters represented by small arrows. This is nothing but, say suppose A, this module, it has it has to invoke this module B. Say suppose it is giving some of the inputs or it is passing some of the variables. Say something like this, like variable, this small a will be passed from A to B. So that time what will happen? How do we represent it? So we represent something like this. Okay, we have to represent something like this. This means A is sending a parameter, the small a, to the module B. And now B wants to return something. Okay, B has performed some operation and it wants to return something. In that case, how do we represent it? In this manner. The arrow from here, say suppose it is returning Z. Some output it is returning. Okay. Yeah. So the same thing it has been explained in the last point. The arrow labeled by the parameters received by B as input and the parameters returned by B as output with the direction of flow of the input and output parameters represented by small arrows. Okay, we have achieved these things. So A is a module, B is another module. A will invoke B. A is called as a superordinate and B is called as subordinate, and the parameter exchange of the information, how it is happening. So if any parameters are passed through one module to another module, it is represented like this, a small arrow with the direction of the input or output and the parameters that are passed along with it. Okay, now we have a few more things. So the next one is the parameters can be shown to be data or control. Okay, so here for example, whatever the parameters we have passed, suppose A is a parameter, it has been passed from A to B, right? So it is a parameter. Say suppose this is a input thing which I have given and Z is the output. Now okay, so if data has been passed, how it has to be represented? Along with that label, along with the small arrow, you have to have the unfilled circle at the tail of the label. And you are passing the control. If suppose you are passing the control, then how you have to denote it? With the filled circle at the tail. So it is like, say suppose example, you are passing the parameter A, say that is a input and it is a data. Okay, so what you have to do is like you have to have this unfilled circle over this tail of the arrow. So this represents, so A is passing the data small a to the module B. Now suppose if you want to give the control to the module B, how do you represent? So you have to represent something like this. This is your module A and you have module B over here. Okay, then this is a normal arrow. Okay, that means A will invoke B and A is giving some control to B. So how you have to represent that control, flow of control? You have to have a circle. Now this should be a filled circle. Okay, this should be a filled circle along with this arrow, the input thing, and you have to have the name for it. Say suppose A. Now this filled circle, it represents the flow of control from A to B. Unfilled circle, it says flow of data from A to B. For output also same thing. So you have to have a unfilled circle from B to A. Okay. Now the next thing in this notation is a module A has subordinates B, C and D and A repeatedly calls the modules C and D. This can be represented by a loop around the arrows joining the subordinates C and D to A. Okay. Now say suppose you have three modules, three subordinates. Okay. Let me draw another diagram so it would be easier to understand. Okay. So you have a module A. You have, okay, just a minute. Okay. Then you have module B. This is a subordinate and say suppose you have two more modules C and you have module D. Okay, so the thing is these all should be boxes. Right now the shape is not proper here, so all of these things, it should be, whenever you represent a module, it should be a proper box. Okay, now A is a superordinate and it has three modules B, C and D. So how do we connect it with these arrows? Something like this. Okay, so this represents A is a superordinate and BCD are subordinates. Suppose you have A module which repeatedly calls this C and D module. Then how can we represent it? So you can represent something like this. Suppose A, it repeatedly calls C and D. That means you have to have an arrow starting from here, joining the C and D arrows and giving it back here. Okay. Now this represents this arrow. This represents that module A is repeatedly calling module C and module D. Okay, getting it? Now the last thing is, if the invocation of the module C and D in a module A depends on the output or the outcome of some decision, that is represented by a small diamond in the box for A with the arrows joining C and D. So the last point, what it says is, suppose the modules C and D, like the module, it will invoke C and D based on some condition. So that condition, how can you represent in a small diamond like this one? Again, we have module A, we have module B, C and D. Okay. Just a minute, I did a small mistake over here. Now, say suppose your module A, it would directly call this module B. It should be a straight arrow. Okay, something like this. And say suppose A is calling C and D based on some output of some condition, say true or false condition. Then how can we represent that is, you have to have a small diamond here, that is a decision. Let me draw it properly. Okay, something like this. You have a diamond over here. Okay, so whenever you have this type of diamond associated with any module, it says that this is some condition, and based on this condition, the C and D modules would be called. Now how can we represent the arrows? So do not start directly with A, so you have to start from this diamond. Okay, something like this. So we represent, okay, let me refresh it once again. Structure charts. So how can you draw a structure chart is like, so you will have different modules. Okay, so for example, we have module A, B, C and D. So the modules should be represented within a box and it should be named. The box should be named, and for connecting the each modules, you should be having the arrows. Then the parameters, if suppose you are sending some parameters to your subordinate, and okay, the main module is called as the subordinate, and the invoked modules we call it as subordinates. Okay, and whenever you have the data passing as a parameter, how do you represent it? Like, you have to represent something like this whenever you have the data as input or output. Okay, so it is something like this. Okay, this means Z is passed as an input to C and Y will be given as output from the C to A. So you have to have the small arrows with unfilled circles. And if suppose you are passing the control, then you should be having this filled circle with the arrow to that particular module. And if your subordinates will be called based on the some condition, then you have to mention something like this, that is a diamond should be present, and from that diamond you should be having arrows reaching that particular subordinates. Okay, and say suppose A is calling module B and say some other module continuously, then you should be having a loop like this one. Okay, so this is the concept of your structure charts. This is how you. Now let's take an example of the structure chart for the sort program. Okay, so this is a entire structure chart for the sort program. So what would happen here is you have a main module, then you this is a subordinate, and then we have four subordinate modules: read numbers, sort, add, and switch. Now, how does a sort program work? Suppose we have a main program. This will take the input, say suppose the number of maximum number of the array and the array elements. So what would be happening is, first it would be reading the numbers, like the array numbers and the length of the array would be read by this module. Then it would be given as input to the main module. Now, once the main module gets this information, it would be giving the same information, that is a comma n, to the sort function. Now, this sort function, what it will do? It will compare the numbers one by one, right? First the zeroth element and the first element will be compared. Then second and the third, something like this. So this sort function, what it does, instead of doing all the work here, if the comparisons and if it is, whenever you compare any two numbers and if it is greater than that, it has to be switched, right? Either ascending or descending order. That switch, another module is present here. Again, remember the sort has a subordinate module called as switch. So here again, you'll give the same thing the array elements, that is the order of elements, to the switch function. It does the comparison and it responds to this module sort. Now this module, what it does, it will give the sorted array to the main function. We have another module called as add-in. So what this will do is, it will take the input from the main function, that is the length of the array and the numbers, and then it would add and it would calculate the sum, and the sum would be returned to the main function. So this is how you draw a structure chart. Okay. Next, the modules in a system can be classified into few classes. Okay, the modules whatever we had seen now, right? So in the function oriented design, so your system would be decomposed into modules. Okay, now these modules can be again classified into few classes. There are five types of classes. The first one is input module, then output module, transform module, coordinate module, and composite module. So we'll look into this modules or the classes, the diagrams for that, then I'll explain what is it. So you have an input module. So what it says is like, the modules are called as input. Okay, the modules that obtain the information from their subordinates and then pass it to their superordinate. So these type of modules we call it as input modules. So example for that is here. So this module, what it will do is like, it takes the information from its subordinate. So this is an intermediate. Okay, so it takes something, subordinate is here, it takes the information from that subordinate and it passes data to the its superordinate. Getting it? So this type of module we call it as input module. Now the next is output module. So these modules, that they take information from their superordinate and then pass it to the subordinates. Like there is one superordinate here and some subordinate here. So this output module, it takes the output from your superordinate, that is the data from the superordinate, and then moves it to the subordinate. So this we call it as the output modules. Now, as the name suggests, the input and the output modules are typically used for input and output of the data from and to the environment. The input module, it gets the data from the sources and get it ready to be processed. Your output module takes the output produced and prepare it for the proper presentation to the environment. Okay. Now, so the next is transform module. This one. So as the name suggests, this module does some transformation. It takes some input, does the transformation, and gives the output. So as you can see in the diagram, it is taking input X, it is doing some transformation, and the output is Y. So this is a transform module. The last one, last but one is coordinate module. So what it does is, so it will manage the flow of data to and from different subordinates. Say suppose you have one subordinate here and another subordinate here, This coordinate module, it will manage the data flow from these two things, these two subordinates. It will take the input from one subordinate and then pass it to the another subordinate. The last one is composite module. So as the name suggests, composite, this means this module is responsible for performing more than one function. In the diagram you could see it is taking some output from a subordinate, that is X output, then it is giving the X output to some other module. It is taking the Y output here and again passing that Y to its subordinate. There is some more than one function is going on here, so that's called as composite module. Okay. Okay, we'll stop it here today. In the next class, we'll start with this structured design methodology. Fine? Okay, we'll end the session now. Thank you.